we'll move on to our next segment here, which is going to be break down your water. Anglers break down your water. So, what we like to do here is dive into somebody's lake, pond, or not pond, lake or river or fishery, local fishery, and see if I got it pulled up here on the phone, get it up here on the screen. So, this is Neely Henry. Austin sent this in to us. You said you fished there once before. I fished there a couple of times, but not many times. And it's really a lot of river, but then some backwaters and little creeks and stuff. There's a lot of industrial looking stuff up here. Have you ever fished kind of around the bridges and all up here?
Not really. But I mean, like, if we need any really good information on this place, I could phone a friend and call Matt Heron. I'm sure he
Oh,
could
yeah,
tell me.
phone Matt. Yeah, Matt he'd probably tell us a little bit, but I don't know if he'd give up the goods. It's a pretty lake. I mean, like I said, I've been up there a time or two, but man, I went up there in like January and fished a college tournament. And it was, I don't even remember what the water temp was, but like day one, I think it was, say there was 120 boats and there was 70 zeros on the first day. Jordan Lee and I fished that tournament together, and he caught the big fish of the tournament sitting in the captain's seat on the front of the boat the next day. He done put it up in the front of the boat, had a shaky head on a bridge, rip wrap, and caught a 5-pounder. I think it was the only fish we caught the whole tournament. It was miserable. But
I bet.
But it's a great lake to break down. So let's see. Look at all these little deals. Look at this little deal. Looks like some shoreline vegetation. So should be what early post spawn, maybe a couple still on bed, so shad spawns and stuff. What you like to swim a jig, right? So there's some vegetation.
They definitely swimming a jig, frog over in the vegetation, spinnerbait on the outsides. Maybe even getting into some walking bait topwater action. There might be some. I'm sure there's some kind of shad spawn going on somewhere, and probably with this crazy weather, there's probably some bluegill pulling up the spawn somewhere.
Yeah, we're starting to see that down here. I'm maybe an hour and a half south of there, and we're already seeing some bluegill spawning. So mostly above gas in here. It looks like a river run, some backwaters, and I mean you can tell there's a boat just came out of there, so you can get in there pretty good. What do you look for when you go to a new lake that's a river system this time of year?
I'm looking at well, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pay attention to water to see if I'm seeing any shad spawning, any fry. Try to figure out what kind of stage they're in, because you could show up some of these places and it's just been warm and you didn't really know it, and they could have just gone ahead and skipped the stage and be on their way out. So I'm always trying to figure out. When I get there where they were and where they're going. It's always in my head, and it seems like you do that by trial and error and by fishing, not by riding. And the signs you can get, like I said, are fry, bluegill beds. If you're still seeing that stuff in the shallows, there's going to still be some fish shallow and around where you're at. If that stuff's null and void and you're not seeing anything, then you might want to change location.
Yeah, that it looks like really it's pretty spread out where you can. It'd take a lot of time to fish this place. Like I said, most of the main run's river, but there's a lot of room in these backwaters, and it looks like it's pretty shallow. Some of it may not be fishable, but I'm sure there's plenty.
See, the docks will get my attention. Post spawn and docks always go together.
Yeah, you like to skip that old jig under there.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do is to swim under that thing this time of year.
That's one thing I wanted to talk to you about. We'll get into the tips and tricks here in a minute, but that's one thing I noticed before when I was watching you fish. Back when you were getting started with the Elite Series, you were swimming a jig under. A lot of guys throw like a little swim bait under docks now, and a lot of those fish are probably a lot more pressured. But you were swimming a jig under those docks, and talk about that. Like post, so that's more of a postpone deal.
It is. Well, it's kind of the postpone / when the shad spawn and kind of when the crappie are done doing their things and they get around the docks and bridge pylons or any kind of vertical structure that gives you some shade. And basically, it's just a white jig with a big white chunk, and you kind of yo-yo that thing through there. You're not really swimming it like a traditional swim jig, like casting, reeling. You're just more of a finesse presentation with a big size bait. You're just trying to emulate. It could be any of those things: a big gizzard shad, a ball of little shad, a crappie, anything. And you can just get some very big bites in the early to late post spawn doing that.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty. I got to try that more, especially now with the herring and all, which we've got a lot of crappie and stuff on Martin, but it'll be interesting to see if the herring, which The herring never really get super shallow, or they stay out most of the time. They just get shallow to spawn.
Yeah, they do, but no, at night they come up,
Really?
which is that. And I enjoy catching them at night. That's when you catch them on like a big redfin, big weight bait, Berkeley surge shad, stuff like that. Anything that's big that you can get out there. Um, but typically for the most part, once they come do their thing, they're open water critters.
I gotcha. Well, no herring in Neely Henry. So let's move back down. Let's see, we got a little cloud cover there. What about this little deal here? Right, it's not far down. So there's some more docks, and it looks almost like some kind of little jetty or something right here.
Looks like a little wing dam or something. I
Yeah,
mean that's a good place to, you can catch them on top of it, on top water, sides cranking or dragging a worm or a jig. Or I mean, like I said, that's all going to be just depending on what time of year it is. Like right now, the first thing that come to my head would be top water going across it,
yeah.
just looking for that active fish.
Like you're talking about, the weather's so wild right now. I think it's supposed to be high 30s, low 40s. It was last night, and it's going to be tonight again there, and here. So it's down here. Like you'll see a lot of times in Alabama. So Neely Henry is a good example of that. You'll have fish in several stages all through the spring, because you'll have some that are up shallow already that'll jump right on the bed. The first couple we had, like I think we had 6 or 7 days in the 80s, maybe not all the way up to Neely Henry, but down here around Auburn and Montgomery, like a month and a half ago, it seems like. And then now we're back down to the 40s at night and highs in the 60s some days. So you never really know. But some of those deeper fish may not move with that first warm snap, but some of them up shallow would have jumped up. And so there's always a little of everything going on. What about mixture here on like mud lines and stuff? Do you look for that kind of stuff when you're fishing rivers?
I do, especially in the earlier part of the year, in the colder months, because I think if you have some clear water and that wind pushes in against the current or whatnot and creates a good mud line, I always like to look for that, because I think you get a few extra bites doing that. I think it's easy meal for fish, especially with a lot of clear water around. I don't typically like dirty water around the spawn. I think it interrupts what they're doing. I don't think they feel quite as comfortable, meaning the fish. But definitely later on, as the spawn goes away, and like I said, bluegill time comes in, I don't mind mud lines at all, but that's just a place they can hide and ambush prey.
What about, and it may have no correlation whatsoever, but I'm curious what your thoughts are. Like mud lines, obviously, fish will use them. Shade lines, fish will use. Do you see any correlation between the two of those, or do you see like differences between how fish?
I think it's kind of the same, because I've watched people uh, fish bridges before, and I noticed this. It was last year at the Lake Hartwell tournament. I was catching them off a jerkbait on a bridge, and you watch people that fish bridges. Most of them just come in and fish the columns, and they're gone. Well, that bridge gives you one complete shade line all the way around. So I can't tell you throughout the years, especially jerking and throwing a swim bait, how many fish I've caught that were just hanging under the actual bridge of the shade. Because if you draw it back, a bridge is nothing but a big dock,
Yeah,
and they get in the shade in the dock. It's dark under the bridge. It's the same thing, and I think that's a huge mistake people make. They don't fish everything that's there. But I think that the shade line and mud line, it's all the same. It's just ambush.
yeah, I like that. All right, so let's see if we can't give them a little bit more here before we jump off of Neely Henry. That looks like some of this looks like the water was down a good bit there when that picture was taken. So that's kind of can be to our benefit. That's one good thing about studying satellite is you can see where it's almost like a topo deal. So talking
Yeah.
about bluegill beds and brim beds and stuff. Well, let's I guess try to find a little shallow point or the back of a pocket. What do you look for brim beds on a river system like that?
Same thing. I'm looking for something that's out of the current. It's going to have a break. Typically, just something that just jets off one way or another. It doesn't have to be huge either. I've seen them right off the edge and on the side of an eddy, and I've seen them all the way back up in the swamp. But I don't think they have to be deep. I just think they need to be, well, to where the bluegill feel comfortable and do their thing, and the bass are going to find them. That's one thing a bass is going to find. When they get bluegill get on the bed, bass are coming to eat them.
Yeah, ain't no doubt about that. That looks like I said, the water looks like it's down in this picture. So maybe just get right around that eddy, right around that point, and find your little spot right there.
Yeah, and like maybe pay attention to where there's more sand than rock, or if there's a tree or something, lay down on some sand, just anything to hold them. And if you see that, you're going at it.
So when you go to look for that, so obviously, like if you get right there around that corner, and you don't just stumble on them right away. You just pick up a topwater and go all the way up that bank, just kind of in search mode.
I would, especially with all that cover there. There's a great chance that if they're not spawning, the ones that are going to spawn are up there around it, and it's a good place to catch leftovers. Because see, people think about the bluegill spawn. Well, right after that, in most parts of the country, you're going to have the mayflies coming. They all kinds of happens in the same places. So that's like I said, you have to use your eyes and pay attention to what's going on. This is the one time when your depth finder is not really going to make that big a difference. Your eyes are what count.
Yeah.